Welcome to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm your host, Cam McKinney. This is episode number 105 of the podcast. And in this edition of the podcast, I'm talking about 49ers head coach Kyle Shanahan getting a contract extension from the Niners to remain their head coach for at least the next 6 seasons. He has a career record of 23-25, but more importantly, he is coming off of a trip to the Super Bowl. Even though they lost, it makes sense that the 49ers would want to keep Shanahan as their head coach long term, especially for a team like the Niners who haven't had that much success with their last 3 coaches. Jim Harbaugh, yes, he went to a Super Bowl, but his run didn't last nearly as long as it should have because he wasn't getting along with the organization. Jim Tomsula was a complete and total disaster, and Chip Kelly wasn't the football genius we all expected him to be. So they hire Shanahan. In his second year, he leads them to a Super Bowl, and oh, by the way, he's only 40 years old, so this relationship should go on for at least the next decade. He should be the head coach of the 49ers. I feel like all we talk about is how hard it is to find the next young franchise quarterback. Like, oh, it's impossible to replace Tom Brady. We'll never get the next Tom Brady. You know what you'll also never get? What's really hard to find? That next young great head coach who will turn into Bill Belichick. And when you find that guy, you start to really have an advantage over other teams. Look at the Patriots' dominance with Belichick. That's because of great coaching. But it's also about more than that. It's about the stability of knowing that each and every offseason you don't have to go out and hire the next head coach. That's what other teams have to deal with. That's what the Buffalo Bills have to deal with. That's what the 49ers have had to deal with this past decade, is that every few seasons they have to go out and try to hire the next great head coach instead of improving their football team. Now you have Kyle Shanahan, and basically all the pressure is off you trying to find the next head coach. You have your guy. He's 40 years old. He should be your head coach for the next 10 to 15 years, and you should be able to go on some pretty impressive Super Bowl runs. That's what I would expect from the 49ers moving forward. You no longer have the pressure of finding that next great head coach, while all these other teams are out here trying to find that guy. A huge advantage that the Niners and also the Rams have moving forward is that they have young head coaches who already have Super Bowl experiences in Kyle Shanahan and Sean McVay. That's their big advantage, is that they're probably going to be around a while, and that these teams, the Niners and Rams, no longer have to be part of the coaching carousel where after that Friday where everyone's fired, they have to go out and spend their entire offseason trying to find the next guy who they have no clue whether or not he is the next guy. Well, guess what? Those teams have found that guy, and that's why those teams are going to be pretty good for the next 10 to 15 years. I would expect those two teams to compete for Super Bowl titles. It's all about the head coaching hire. It's all about the stability of knowing each and every year who your head coach is. Think about the great head coaches in the league right now. I think Bill Belichick, I think Andy Reid, I think Mike Tomlin, I think Sean Payton. And then after that, there's a big drop off, and most teams are hiring retread head coaches like Mike McCarthy and Ron Rivera, where the actual advantage is that Bill Belichick will be there for the Patriots each and every year. Andy Reid is going to be there for the Chiefs each and every year. Mike Tomlin has been a stable with the Pittsburgh Steelers, and Sean Payton has been with the Saints since forever. That's the advantages that these teams have, is not just that these guys are football geniuses. I think you can find a lot of people who are football geniuses. It's that they have the stability of knowing who their head coach is, and they can build a football team with that guy each and every year, knowing what it's going to be like because we have that guy as our head coach. While these other teams like the Browns have great potential because they have Baker Mayfield, they have Odell Beckham. You know what they don't have? A stable, good, young head coach. That's what the Cleveland Browns are missing, and hopefully they find that and Kevin Stefanski, but that's what that team has been missing, and that's now what the 49ers have. They have a young, stable head coach who is going to be there whether the team is good or bad, and that's an advantage of having a guy who's going to be there year in and year out. There's no other reason to give Kyle Shanahan a huge contract extension other than to say this guy is going to be here a while, and I think that's a huge advantage. It's also an advantage in other sports. Like, I think the Celtics have had some success having Brad Stevens be the known guy as the Celtics head coach. Like, I think in other sports, it is a huge advantage to have a young head coach who you know is going to be there a while. And now the 49ers have that advantage also, because we all know Kyle Shanahan is the future of the 49ers. I also just think in general, that's the way to go, is to make a hire like a Shanahan or a Sean McVay and not go through these retreads like Adam Gase, like Ron Rivera. I'm sorry, those guys have had some success. I mean, Rivera has been to a Super Bowl. Mike McCarthy has been to a Super Bowl. But I would rather take a risk and hire a young head coach who is going to be the face of my organization, and then I would get really a lot of credit for finding this guy. Like, the Rams have gotten a huge amount of credit for giving Sean McVay that job at such a young age. Also think that when you hire a retread head coach, you are putting a ceiling on your expectations. Yes, if some team next offseason goes out and hires Jason Garrett, there's an expectation that the team is going to be like, 8-8 or 10-6, and at best, they can be a playoff team that gets eliminated in the playoff early. Like, you know how far your team can go by that hire. But when you hire a guy like Sean McVay or Kyle Shanahan, you don't know what their ceiling is. Yes, there is a risk of finding out if they are good head coaches, but the ceiling is they could possibly reach the Super Bowl and win. Like, I think in the next decade, both of those guys could possibly win Super Bowls. That's not something I think Ron Rivera could do. That's not something I think Mike McCarthy can do with the Cowboys. For me, the Cowboys and Redskins should have gone the route of the Sean McVay hire or the Kyle Shanahan hire. Hire these young head coaches, not these retreads who have had success, but you know what their ceiling is, and they most likely have already had their best success as a head coach. We have not seen the best of Sean McVay, in my mind, and we have not seen the best of Kyle Shanahan, but we have seen the best of Ron Rivera. We know what that is. We know what the best of Mike McCarthy is. And oh, by the way, those guys had great quarterbacks. Ron Rivera had Cam Newton and Mike McCarthy had Aaron Rodgers. And right now, neither of them have quarterbacks at that high of level. So will they even be the same head coaches they were at their last destination, or could they have a huge fall off? But either way, you know what the expectations in Dallas and Washington are. In the moment, those retread hires look splashy, like, oh, the Cowboys are signing Mike McCarthy. That's a big deal. But the only time we care about those hires are when they happen. The ones that work out in the long run are the ones that are so good you didn't expect it. Like, nobody could have foreseen the success that Sean McVay was going to have with the Rams. Kyle Shanahan, we kind of saw it coming, but still, it was kind of a surprise that he was able to get the 49ers to a Super Bowl in his third season as head coach. I mean, you can also just do the math and say that the 49ers are going to have Kyle Shanahan as their head coach long after Mike McCarthy is the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys. So why not give yourself so many opportunity years to win Super Bowls? That's what you're going for. You're going for the dynasty. Now, maybe the Niners and Rams won't become dynasties, but you can't tell me there isn't a distinct possibility that both of them could do it. And one of the biggest reasons why is because they have young head coaches who are going to be there year in and year out. At best, Mike McCarthy could have a 5-year run with the Cowboys, and maybe they make a Super Bowl. But I'm not expecting them to win. I think more NFL teams should do this, especially when they have young quarterbacks. Sean McVay and Jared Goff, Kyle Shanahan and Jimmy Garoppolo. They are having success. You know who's not really having success? Adam Gase and Sam Darnold. Get Sam Darnold, a young offensive-minded head coach, and I bet the Jets could be, guess what, real contenders. And maybe early on they go through the growing pains of what it's like to be a head coach, but the results could come in a big way, like, oh, I don't know, Sean McVay going to the Super Bowl with the Rams and Kyle Shanahan going to the Super Bowl with the 49ers. Young head coaches are having success in this league, and other teams should seriously take notice and stop hiring retread head coaches who we already know what they are in the NFL. Like, I think it's insane that the Oakland Raiders have John Gruden as their head coach. It's not even about the fact of giving him $100 million contract, which is insane. saying. It's just I know what John Gruden is. He'll go through the quarterback carousel, and we know what he is. Yes, he's won a Super Bowl, but he's really not that great of a head coach. The Oakland Raiders, like the Rams and like the Niners, should have a young, offensive-minded head coach to go along with a new quarterback or to go along with Derek Carr. Another example of a young coach having a lot of great deal of success early on has been Mike Vrabel. He just defeated the New England Patriots in the postseason. I think we all think the Titans are a team on the rise in the future. They have their quarterback, but more importantly, they have their coach who you think is going to be there a while. That's a huge advantage he has over other teams in that conference. They don't have that stability of knowing who their head coach is going to be year in and year out. I think that's the rarity. You can find that quarterback. Ryan Tannehill can reveal himself to Mike Vrabel. But guess what? The real advantage the Titans have is having Mike Vrabel as their head coach. That's why they're a team on the rise. That's why they're a team I wouldn't be that surprised in the next 5 years if they reached a Super Bowl. Look at a team like the Ravens. They found a guy in John Harbaugh. He was young. They didn't make a splashy hire. They just hired John Harbaugh. And guess what? They have had so much success with Joe Flacco, they won a Super Bowl with, and now with Lamar Jackson, they're a team that we think could win another Super Bowl. John Harbaugh, the stability of having him as your head coach, it wasn't a splashy hire at the time. We weren't all congratulating them for getting John Harbaugh. Like, that's the type of hire teams should make more. I'm not even saying making that type of hire will mean you're going to win a Super Bowl or compete each and every year. Yes, Sean McVay is going to have some down years. Kyle Shanahan is going to have some down years. John Harbaugh has had down years. Those other great head coaches I talked about have had down years, but the stability of having them means that just because they have that down year, you don't get rid of them. There are still more chances for them to win. I guarantee if Mike McCarthy and Ron Rivera are not good within their first 2 seasons as head coach of the Cowboys and Redskins, that they will be fired and they will just move on from them. These teams go through like these 2-year cycles of having a head coach and moving on from them. Like, look at the New York Giants have done recently. It's maddening what they've done with their head coaches recently. Hopefully they give Joe Judge an honest chance to be their head coach, and hopefully he's a young head coach on the rise. But instead of going for those 2-year cycles, commit to a guy for at least 4 to 5 years and see what you've got in him. Because to go through these like 3-year cycles of hiring retread head coach after retread head coach, like look at the Buffalo Bills. That's another good example. They were hiring retread head coaches like Shan Gailey and Rex Ryan, and now they have their guy in Sean McDermott, and I think that's a team on the rise. Sean McDermott was not the splashy hire. Nobody was clamoring for Sean McDermott to be the next head coach of the Buffalo Bills, but it might be the hire that has the Buffalo Bills seriously have real success over the New England Patriots. Like, that's a distinct possibility. The reward of hitting on these young head coaches is better than the risk. Like, it's just worth it to make these kind of hires, commit to these young head coaches who are inexperienced, and then when they have the experience, they develop and they become good, and then year in and year out, you know who the head coach of your football team is going to be. I think that's the real advantage. Like, I think the 49ers' success has more to do with Kyle Shanahan as their head coach than it does with Jimmy Garoppolo as their quarterback. Moving forward, Kyle Shanahan is way more important to the 49ers than Jimmy Garoppolo could ever imagine being. Like, he just went to the Super Bowl with Jimmy Garoppolo playing subpar at times. That's the value of Kyle Shanahan. Like, his first few seasons, he went 6-10 and 4-12. There are some teams that are so stupid, they would have fired him over that. But the Niners were rewarded by keeping him as the head coach. Then he goes 13-3, and they just are coming off a trip to the Super Bowl. The Oakland Raiders once fired Hugh Jackson after 1 season of going 8-8. Like, we need to stop this 2-year cycle of head coaching hire. Commit to a person and commit to somebody who's never been a football head coach before, because then there's not a ceiling on what you can succeed in your organization. Like, I'm sorry, there's just like when you hire someone who's been an NFL head coach for at least a decade, there's a ceiling to your expectations. But when you hire unknown young head coaches like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, there's not a ceiling. Like, you could seriously have great success if these guys turn out to be really good head coaches. And then the advantage is, it's not that you're going to be good for the next 3 or 4 years. It's that you have the possibility of being good for the next 10 years. Now, could something seriously go wrong and Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan get fired the next 5 years? Yes, that could seriously happen, but I doubt that it's going to. Making the right hire and committing to a head coach is the most important thing I think your organization can do, and it's why the Cleveland Browns were not good last season, because they committed to the wrong person, and they wasted an entire season of Baker Mayfield. But the issue for the Browns is even bigger than just committing to the right person. It's that every 2 seasons, they have to go through the coaching cycle. It's not that they're hiring bad candidates, which they are. It's also that each and every 2 years, they have to go out there and waste their entire offseason trying to hire the next new head coach of the Cleveland Browns instead of having a stable organization. It's not about the front office of the Cleveland Browns. It's not about the players of the Cleveland Browns. It's that they don't have a stable head coach who is going to be the face of their organization like the Rams do, like the Niners now do. That's the value of Kyle Shanahan as the head coach of the 49ers for the next 6 seasons. It's not that he's a football prodigy. It's not that his father was a great head coach and now he is. It's that each and every year the 49ers now know that Kyle Shanahan is their head coach, and that's going to lead to success. That's going to lead to the possibility of success, because that's what I think the Steelers have had, the Patriots have had, the Chiefs have had. They've had stability in their head coach, in the face of the organization that's not going to change anytime soon. A head coaching hire should outlast your quarterback. Like, Kyle Shanahan should be the head coach of the 49ers long after Jimmy Garoppolo is gone. Sean McVay will be the head coach of the Rams after Jared Goff is gone. Bill Belichick is still the head coach of the New England Patriots. Tom Brady is gone. John Harbaugh is still the coach of the Ravens. Joe Flacco is gone. Those guys have outlasted their quarterbacks. That's why the coaching hire, I believe, is more important than who your quarterback is, because it's not about the stability at the quarterback position, where I think it's more about the stability of who your head coach is. Look at a team like the Dolphins. They went 5-11, and then the last game of the season they beat the Patriots, but people think they're a team on the rise because they have a nice young head coach in Brian Flores. Like, I think that adds value to your team. That makes you a destination. Yes, they got Tua, and that could really work out for them too. But I think the stability, if they long-term commit to Brian Flores, will mean success for the Miami Dolphins, more so than who their quarterback is. Signing a guy like that as their head coach is way better than going out there and getting a retread head coach, even if that's a guy who's had success. Yes, I know Mike McCarthy's won a Super Bowl. I know Ron Rivera has been to a Super Bowl, but I know what their ceilings are as a head coach. I've seen it. I know where that goes. Like, that's a 5-year window. But Brian Flores is 39 years old. That's a possible 15-year window for the Miami Dolphins to have success. That's what this is about. Long-term windows of success. Yes, there's going to be down years for Brian Flores, but that window, you have a possibility to be a stable organization. That's something that the Patriots have been, and the other teams in the AFC East have not been. Another example of this is Cliff Kingsbury. He's 40 years old. He has Kyler Murray. The advantage the Cardinals have is year in and year out, Cliff Kingsbury is going to be able to develop as a head coach as long as the Cardinals commit to him. Maybe it won't work out, but I think that they have a real upside. Like, I expect the Cardinals next season to be better than the Dallas Cowboys. I just think that's the way to go. Yes, there are coaches that get fired that have had success that deserve other chances, but for the most part, I think you should go for the young hires guys who's never been a head coach, develop him, and then become a stable organization, because that's how you have success. That's how the Rams and Niners are going to have success. I also just think that guy who's on his second head coaching job never wins a Super Bowl. Like, that never happens. It happened for Pete Carroll. Like, he's been great with Seattle, but for the most part, that rarely ever happens. Yes, it happened for Andy Reid, but unless you're hiring like Hall of Fame level coaches like Pete Carroll or Andy Reid, you should go and hire a young head coach on the rise. Ultimately, I think stability at the head coaching position is more important than who your quarterback is. I do. I think that's the most important thing of an organization, is the stability of your head coach. There have been plenty of teams with great quarterbacks that have not had success, but if you hire a coach with great potential and give him 4 to 5 years to do well, I believe you have a higher chance of success than if you hire a retread head coach. In the next 6 seasons, don't be surprised if Kyle Shanahan wins a Super Bowl, and I also wouldn't be surprised if he did it with somebody at quarterback who wasn't Jimmy Garoppolo. He is the future of the 49ers, and the Niners are well off because of it. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Head to Head Podcast. I'm Cam McKinney. There'll be a new episode of the podcast every Monday on Apple Podcasts and iTunes, so please rate, review, and subscribe.